Hello, this is the LEGO Technic Ford GT, new for 2023. This has 1,488 pieces and I built it live over on my Twitch channel. I paid $120 US for it, and if you see a View Products link on your screen, you can click that to see where you can buy it. This is approximately 40 centimeters or 16 inches long, which makes it something in the range of roughly 11th scale. So this is much smaller than one of the big Technic supercars. It's smaller than, I believe, the Porsche RSR, the white and black and red one that they did, but it's larger than the Corvette, the orange one they did to start a new scale, larger than the one in the car carrier, larger than the green Mustang, and close in scale to the creator experts or modern day icons brick built cars. The build process for this was surprisingly complex. This has a ton of really small pieces, especially Technic panel parts, and was just generally a much more dense build than you would normally expect for something of this size. This feels to me, as putting it together, it feels like a full-on supercar, you know, one of those really big, really expensive ones, only smaller. Attention to detail is generally very good throughout the design, with some exceptions that I'll cover more later on. I'll start to pick out specific things that I don't like. But just overall, you can see this is not a very gappy design. It does suffer a little bit from the classic, well, modern classic Technic blue pin and blue axle pin situation and scenario that we have to deal with a lot. But fortunately, this being a dark blue colored car, the blue pins don't stand out all that much. Instead, you just have the red axles that do stand out, as well as some tan colored parts. But generally, the color mix isn't too bad this time around. And just the total lack of gaps is really impressive to me. Well, not total lack, but relative lack of gaps, especially for something that's this small, I think is actually really good on this. And gosh, there were so many dark blue pieces that had to be recolored specifically for this model. I do appreciate that, and I think that a lot of Technic builders, and especially custom Technic builders, will appreciate, because the dark blue is just such a muted tone, and I think it makes it a lot easier to build things that are more believable, custom stuff that is trying to be a little bit more recognizable as an a real world actual thing that's been duplicated. This has an engine in it, and it's a full-size one. It's not like in the Mustang and the Corvette and such, where you get the little tappets, or even the Bolide most recently. It's got the full-sized classic style of Technic cylinders in there, in clear, thankfully, which means that you can see those pistons going up and down. It's got a six-cylinder engine, like the real thing does have that 3.5 EcoBoost V6 in it, so this is appropriate. The position is roughly appropriate. It's a bit high. It's a bit high up off the ground because of reasons we'll see in just a minute, but it's really nice to be able to see those pistons going up and down rather than limiting things with the gray, maybe slightly more realistic gray cylinder pieces. Yeah, this just works out much better. This has no working or workable transmission in it, but instead it does at least have a differential that does work down below. Everything is connected there. And well, the main reason that the engine has to be lifted up is that there is a mechanism that goes beneath it. And that mechanism has nothing to do with the hand of God steering over here, which unfortunately is not connected also to the steering wheels. The steering wheel does not turn, but instead there's a little actuator inside. You can see just a little bit of red right there. When I turn that back, it brings the wing up. I guess it turns from spoiler into wing. Now, it's not the best working mechanism. You kind of have to pump it a little bit, cycle it a little bit to get it to come up all the way. There's also a part underneath where you can push that up to make sure that it goes all the way. This one actually is all the way up. And if I retract it, see, it doesn't go down all the way immediately. Just give it a little tap right there. You can also adjust the angle right here a little bit to make that a little bit better. But basically that mechanism requires a lot of linkages to transfer motion from the cab back there, and as a result they needed to have some clearance underneath the engine. That's okay. It's nice to have actual workable functions in a Technic thing, so I'm not gonna complain about that. Again, hand of God steering up here, it's small. The knob is nice and small. I personally think that a set that's this good, that's this advanced, probably should have gone for steering connection to the steering wheel instead of up here, because this is more of a play feature. I think that's something made for younger kids, well, younger people in general, and at a smaller size, at a cheaper price, would be more needing of play features like that. This angle here is excellent. I'll show you a top view, but I want you to see how this opens up as well. You got the butterfly style door there, which I think just works out really, really nicely. It's smooth. This whole build for each of the doors is very complex. Satisfyingly so. You know, again, this whole thing feels like a very advanced build, or at least, again, advanced for this size of build. And there's a sticker used on the steering wheel. They did get the intended sticker placement for the display directly behind the wheel correct this time. Some of the Speed Champions sets did not. And then there's a sticker over here going across. Looking at the seats, they're not, well, they don't go entirely all the way across. They're not perfect seats, but you know, you kind of at least get the idea of what they're going for with the bucket style. Not sure exactly what type of figure would fit in here. Everybody always likes to say, hey, did you know that they once upon a time made Technic figures? Yes, I'm very aware of those, and they don't fit almost anything these days. The last thing that you can open up is here at the front, but that just exposes a little bit of the steering mechanism, which, you know, at least you can see it there. It's nice to see gears moving, but there's no cargo space, you know, little miniature trunk, which the real thing doesn't have here. It has a little bit of space in the back instead. That's just all good. But, you know, this at least shows you kind of the show-off pose, the mechanism show-off pose, which is impressive enough. I like that. I think that looks pretty good. Also, it has working suspension. It's not too stiff, thankfully, independent, of course. Not too stiff, but it is a bit high. And the whole thing looks significantly better if you modify it, which a number of people have done already. Probably did before the thing was even revealed. You know, all the ones that go out to the sponsored reviewers have a chance to be built up and modified in advance. So you'll definitely see some out there already that are modified to slam it down a lot more than it is by default, which really, really helps the look, because with that huge gap back here especially, I feel like it just looks like it's trying to be an off-roader or an older vehicle, whereas the real GT has very, very small gaps. Now, the size of the wheel front to back and the gap that you get there front to back is a little bit problematic also, but just doing this helps a ton, I think. The top view to me is very impressive. Yes, you can see through it, but this is not intended to be displayed like this with light coming up from behind it. So it's kind of unfair. Don't look at the gaps too much. Look at the overall shaping. I think it's important to look at the overall shaping to see how well or not the designer has captured the core important lines of the source material here. And from this angle and from many angles, it looks really good. While I've got it on its side, I also want you to see what it looks like from the underside, just a little bit more understanding of how it's constructed with this one large box frame piece here. But otherwise, here's the mechanism that goes on, not only underneath the engine, but also underneath the inner suspension mount there for the rear wing activator. And then the steering mechanism just starts right here. So if I turn that, yeah, there you can see that actuating. With respect to accuracy, the more I look at this, the more I see is done right. Again, especially if you just slam it down a little bit, that helps. But check out this reference picture that they include in the instructions. And the biggest thing that, well, there are two big things that are wrong here that throw my eyes off, at least. The windscreen. Well, this doesn't have a windscreen. The model doesn't have a windscreen, so you don't see the line that should go from here all the way out to there. We only see the A pillar line right here, and that's kind of an optical illusion. I think if this had a windscreen on it, or if you could imagine that, you'd see that it's actually much closer than it appears at first. But then this back here, this kind of C, they call it a buttress. It's almost a C pillar. It's just not the right shape at all. That really, really messes with the look of this thing and really takes away a lot from the sleekness of it, the modernness of it, makes it look like an older vehicle. To me, a lot more squared up. That really, really hurts right there. A little bit, I think this helps to steer our eyes with respect to this angle here as well. There's a little bit of sticker that tries to show the rear portion behind the side window to extend that darkness through. But when you've got the blue pins in there that adds some brightness into the space. It just starts to make the whole thing feel more squared off. And I feel like that almost unfairly takes away from the believability of the look of this. The only thing else that I really think, after really looking at it for a while in person, is wrong is what they've done with the headlights. These specialized frosted Technic pieces that are also printed are great parts. Really, really useful parts. And it's good to have the print on there that's, you know, it almost goes out to the edge and everything. But this whole shape and the general appearance of this is definitely dated. It feels old, and it makes the car, again, feel older than it's supposed to be. It reminds me of something from the very late 1990s or early 2000s compared to the real thing, which, as you can see in this photo in the instructions, has much more modern sensibilities to it. One other thing here from the front, it's a little bit of a dark photo, but you can see these angles here, the side bolsters to the air inlet for the intercoolers and such. Very steep angle there. That's not captured from the front here. When you start to turn this to the side, you can start to see how they tried to get that angle there visible from the corners, but from straight on, you lose that completely. Huh. I thought I saw a Porsche 911 GT1 in this, but this is the first time I noticed that this whole front section, front clip, looks a lot like a Maserati MC12. These are the leftover parts, including one of the printed dark blue tile there with the GT logo. And this is a sticker sheet. Yep, lots of stickers. A handful of those have very, very little impact on the overall look of the thing, but some of them I think are very important to establish the continual rally stripes going all the way from the front to the back. Again, the price was $120 US. It's 120 euros or 105 pounds UK, and for 1,488 pieces in Technic, that sounds pretty good on paper. And again, the density of this is really, really good. It was very, very satisfying. And you know, this is cheaper than one of those brick-based sets of a similar size and based on, you know, similar things. I think that the value here is okay, especially relative to other things we can compare it to in recent memory, other scales of cars, to obviously the creator ones or the icons, brick-based ones themselves. Just generally, yeah, it's not too bad. Most of my issues with this are nitpicks, and as I've gotten this in hand, I've found them to be more and more fine little nitpicks. It needs to be lower. This angle is off right here. The headlights, just a little bit, you know, just really, really small things. But I like a lot more of this, and I find many more things that I originally thought were bad are actually quite good on it, or at the very least, very, very passable. I think that the pictures of this, the official pictures weren't as good as they should have been. I think the official pictures depict this in a worse light than it appears in person. But if you're a stickler for the little details, if you really care about the car, the source material, then you might notice these things. Then maybe you don't. You know, different folks perceive things in different ways, and that's valid. But the way that I perceive it is generally very good, especially with the build process, having gone through the build process. But there's just a few things about it that bother me as a representation of a modern, specifically 2022 Ford GT. Some things are just a little bit off, but more I look at it here. Okay, that's not right. I'm seeing Fiero. I saw the Porsche or Maserati from the front. It's the older, slightly older version, you know, previous generation Ford GT. Oh, yeah, that's not right there. Looking at these angles here, but then now that's so good. That's so good. That's really good there, you know? So yeah, those are my thoughts. A little bit conflicted, but at the very least, it is a good Lego Technic set, in my personal opinion. Thank you very much for watching. Got a lot more content to bring you, so I'll get back to work or continue working. Talk to you again soon.